3news.com is also live on TV3 and all affiliates across the country. Our next panelist is Professor Stephen Adei, and let's welcome him as he joins us on the podium.
Good afternoon or evening. Thanks for my senior colleagues, for politically senior colleagues. If you are a public servant, when they become chief of staff, they are your seniors. But in otherwise, one is my senior, one is my junior. But no comments. Two, I'm going to depart from my tests because I don't want to go over what has been said. That's the advantage of being a teacher. You can decide to do 5 minutes or 1 hour. Third, I want to say that I want to comment on two things which have come up before. The first is the cost log thing which was played, which I don't know what it was meant for, but it is very uncivil, civil servant way of doing things, and we must point it out. In any case, he singled out the Ministry of Finance, which I happen to be a member of the advisory board since 2009. I was a member of the advisory board under the previous two ministers, and I've just been appointed again as the member of the advisory board. So I've served under the three previous ones. And each one of them, for some reason, have had to come. It's a matter of a degree with their special team in certain areas. And it's too early to call to say how much this new one is going to do, but to have been voted the best Minister of Finance in the whole of Africa in 1.5 years means he's doing something good. And I think that has to be acknowledged. I just thought that I would say that one, and as a member of the advisory board of the Ministry of Finance, not under this government, but under the previous three governments. The second thing, by way of commenting on what has happened, has to do with GIMPA, which I happen to have led the transformation for 9 years. What people do not realize that GIMPA today is not a private institution. It is wholly owned by the government. Number two, the civil service stopped sponsoring and insisting on scheme of service training at GIMPA in 1995 under Dr. Robert Dodo. So actually, and that was 6 years before I took over. When I came and did the reform, I made sure, because I am a civil servant at the core, 35 years, national and international civil servant. Therefore, we recreated a public service school to be different from all the other departments, so that the civil service school will supervise the scheme of service training of the civil servants. And for 9 years, the civil service training school fees was not increased by a peso. You know, inflation in Ghana, if you do that for 9 years, it comes to almost zero in terms of real value. It was robbing Peter to pay Paul. People came for the evening classes for the top-up degrees. They paid $2,000. They came for the MBA. They paid $6,500. And being a public service school, where the salaries are controlled even by the state, I used it in literally offering free training in terms of devalued one to civil servants. They refuse to go on and go back to the civil service scheme. this is one of the tragedies, and I agree with you, of what has happened to the capacity building there. And I would be the first person. It was one of my frustrations because I never worked in the private sector in my life. I started in the public service in Ghana, 12 years, 3 years at the Commonwealth Secretariat, 11 and a half years at the UN, and came back to the public service of Ghana as head of GIMPA. I think the civil service is not doing themselves good. And especially when provision was made, because the government was not having the money to train them, to almost make civil service training virtually free. Even I extended it to parliamentarians. Every parliamentarian who came to do a master's or first degree in Ghana was dashed 50% of the fee. And every director, as from certain level up to chief director, also, when they wanted to do their masters, had a 50% fee. And I arranged with African Capacity Building, and next year will be the last. There's a free, listen, free masters in public administration for all Anglophone West Africa based in GIMPA today. And I just met a police person who said, thank you, I've had my masters free. I think that the civil servants who are talking about must go back to their scheme, build their capacity, and then the presidents will find them capable. I don't fully agree with Prosper. Yes, when I started in the civil service under Kwame Pieni and that things, yes, it was a top one. Things now cannot be said as it was. And it is in the interest, and I agree with you, for the presidency, the governments, and the civil service themselves to come together to build the capacity of the civil service, because there's a certain capacity of the civil service. If it is not there, no matter whether you are NDC or NPP, you will suffer. Now let me go to a few points because I don't want to follow my colleagues to exceed the time. Should we say to distinguish between professors and politicians? We will watch our time. I'm sure my boss, Kojo Pieni, knew that it was coming. I think that the civil servants themselves, first and foremost, must do their constitutional responsibility, which was read. For example, can we go to any civil service today and say that before and always when they come, you say in tree, or any pochu, so a stranger's eyes are big, but it doesn't see much. If I am head of the Ministry of Finance or I'm head of the Ministry of Agriculture, whilst they are thinking about 3 months before they have their cabinet sorted out, I have gone through the whole manifesto, worked out the implications, what are to be done. When the minister is appointed that day, I meet with the minister. You know, I had been appointed to go as UN ambassador to Namibia when Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was appointed head of African Bureau of UNDP. Somebody did me either as service or disservice. Service because he was one of the most great people to work under. Disservice because he delayed my becoming an ambassador of the UN for 3 years. It came eventually. I was UN ambassador to South Africa and Namibia. And he said that, I've heard that you can help me. Stephen, will you do me a favor? Will you give me 1 year service before you go? What can you do to an African lady of that stature? I said, yes. I briefed her and other things, and I ended up serving her for 3 years. So the certain thing, endearment, which should come from the civil service. And let me tell you, when you do so and the politician sees that you are there to help them to succeed, they will trust you. And that, we must be very fair about that. Again, sorry for coming to the Ministry of Finance. Mr. Foriata has kept the same chief director, one of the most brilliant guys, Numo, there. He has appointed from within the director of budget, not from outside. Head of policy. He found somebody there. He's the head of policy. But he is talking about Ghana beyond aid and few other things. He will bring somebody who has been part of the thinking. That balance. And that leads to a few suggestions, and then I will end so that I will respond to questions thereafter. I have suggested a few things as the way forward. We are in the presidential system in the Fourth Republic, for better or for worse. It hasn't been changed. The presidents come with mandate, and no president will allow anybody, perceived or otherwise, to undermine their mandate. That must be accepted by a civil servant. And that's why proactivity on the civil servants to show that they are there to help you to succeed will be important. Again, it must be the other side appreciate that no presidential appointees or ministerial appointees can ever take over the whole function of the civil service. You can't. There's therefore the need as a nation for us to define, as to a large extent the Americans have done, which positions a minister can come with the president and go with. I personally think that a typical minister will should be allowed to come with about 5 experts whom he will go with, but then they will come and work with the bureaucracy. And not to say that, no, we are there, we must execute your function. The question is that, is the minister going to sit down every day to explain what he wants to everybody? He can't. Somebody must interface. I believe that, assuming we have, even, and I'm going for very serious waters, one of the largest ministerial appointments in our history by Akufo-Addo of 110. No comment further. And each one of them, and of course they are not all ministries. There are about only 35 of them. The 35 has 5 experts, not political appointees, coming with a minister. You are having about 150 to 200 people. And if the Ghana Civil Service of 400,000 thereabout cannot accommodate a presidential team, I'm not talking about the president's office, of about 250, I think that we are saying that you go for your election, we will manage how you survive, and no president will agree. We must therefore define that level, what positions, and then the bickering would stop. Honorable Foriata has not appointed 10 people out of 500 Ministry of Finance employees. And you say that, look, you should allow us to do it. No, he won't allow you. Why? Because he has a mandate to deliver. Tekwe had a mandate, and Dufo had a mandate. Second, I think that the bureaucrats and the politicians should take clue of the dichotomy between 4 years and permanency. And we should work out the details of what it is. I think that the real problem has to do with mistrust between the bureaucracy and the politicians on both sides. And that must be worked at. And I believe, quite interestingly, and I have one point and I end. When I was turning the curve at Kanda, there was unusual traffic. Someone selling paper came. Are you Professor there? I said, yeah. Why is it that when this government came, you have not been criticizing it? And I ask, which one should I criticize? What is somebody is saying true because you are untrue? First of all, listen carefully. For 2 years under Mahama, I never made a statement. Why? Because I know it's difficult to govern. And the statement I made, which I still stand by, were 3. That at a certain point, he has led Ghana down on quality of leadership. You may agree or disagree, but professional, that's what I came to. 2, I think that corruption, which has been with us, was on the ascendancy. And thirdly, I felt that some appointments were wrong and not in the interest of Ghana. But I never opened my mouth for 2 years. Let Akufo-Addo do the same. And some citizen vigilantes will talk. But I will never talk in the first year of a government trying to find its feet with an agenda which I myself have to understand. Finally, I just commented on that because of what somebody said there. Because some in Ghana, there should be statesmen who are neither NDC nor MPP, but put Ghana first. Some of us have chosen to be that. That's why we have never gotten any political job. Lastly, I believe that it is important for the civil service in certain areas, because there are certain areas there have been no political interference. Issuing of passports. In fact, we forget that the police service is a public service. Other things. These areas, the ordinary citizen is unhappy. And if an ordinary citizen is unhappy about their passports, about land registration, about clearing things at the port, you wouldn't expect all of us having culprits not paying our revenues. Any government which is serious would like to do something different. They will need the civil service, but they will not like to maintain the status quo. I thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for that. We thank you.